After studying this module, we shall be able to know the concept, significance and process of communication, learn about the types of organizational communication and the need to improve communication, identify different communication networks and barriers to effective communication, evaluate network of communication prevalent in the organization and its effectiveness. Communication, verbal or non-verbal, is an integral part of life. The existence of electronic media has added another dimension to communication. Email has become the preferred means for official communication. Internet, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter, with the advantage of speed and convenience, facilitate simultaneous communication to millions. At the same time, on such media, it is more difficult to undo the damage caused by misinformation and misinterpretation. Organizational effectiveness and success depends on good communication. In order to utilize the full potential of organizational communication, it is necessary to understand the concept, process and networks of communication. Communication is a personal process of exchange of ideas, behavior and information. It also involves use of symbols to transfer the meaning of information so as to be understood by the receiver as it was intended by the sender. The meaning must be understood in the context. Words are capable of expressing multiple meanings, hence must be interpreted correctly. The choice of medium influences the impact of the message. There is greater possibility of being misunderstood in oral communication because of choice of words carrying different meaning, pronunciation or accent used. But it can be more powerful because much more is communicated through the use of body language, facial expression and the tone of voice. Written communication is more trustworthy because it simultaneously creates a record of that can be cross-checked and is always available for reference. While paper still exists, a lot of written communication is now stored on the computer and hence can be preserved better for future references. Communication can also be used outside formal channels in the form of grapevine or rumors. The medium for interpersonal communication may be oral, lectures, teleconferencing, written, for example circulars, memos, emails, or non-verbal like facial expressions such as a stare, frown or smile. Email has practically replaced the traditional written communication. It is instantaneous, speedy, inexpensive and non-intrusive. It is saved and can be retrieved for future reference. The ease of communication has a negative consequences. Flooding of the mailbox with unnecessary and unwanted emails, hate mail and too much mail. They are often monitored by employees and carry the risk of being made public. In real terms, there is no privacy in communication when using email. Email cannot not only be hacked and misused, it can be accessed by the service provider since the terms and conditions associated with the use of email or Facebook are biased in favor of the service provider. Non-verbal communication conveys the degree of closeness between the people or status differential between them. However, it is not possible to maintain a record of non-verbal communication or report the tone with which the words were spoken. For example, a change in emphasis on the way certain words are spoken has the power to change the meaning of the same words, such as "Please stay back to complete the report" is a request by the boss. "Please stay back to complete the report" is an order that cannot be refused because of the emphasis on words has changed the tone. Each means of communication conveys information differentially to the receiver. Face-to-face communication conveys the spirit behind the words through non-verbal cues along with the factual information. It is effective in terms of spontaneous feedback from the receiver and helps shape the opinions and attitudes of the receiver. Whereas annual reports and bulletins convey only basic information, non-routine information is complex and can be easily misinterpreted. Let us now discuss the direction of communication. It can be vertical downward, vertical upward, or lateral. Vertical downward communication. In an organization, communication can flow vertically downwards. In a traditional hierarchical organization structure, there is one-sided flow of information from top to bottom. The management communicates the vision, ideology, and values of the organization. Directions and instructions for execution of work are sent in the same flow. Feedback regarding the performance of employees is also carried out in downward communication. In the process, it is normal for some amount of information to be lost when it moves between levels. Vertically upwards. Vertically upward communication completes the cyclical flow of communication in the organization. Flow of information from the bottom to the top constitutes vertically upward communication. Surveys on employee satisfaction, problems and suggestions constitute feedback to higher ups. Exit interviews are a rich source of accurate upward communication. Lateral. Laterally, communication occurs amongst managers or team members at the same level, sharing information, experiences or ideas. This helps save time and facilitates coordination. Let us now move on to discuss the managerial communication model. Communication is an integral part of managing people. Luthans and Larson describe an empirically derived managerial communication model. It explains how managers communicate on a daily basis. Their research shows the different communication styles managers adopt. The first dimension moves along a continuum from humanistic interactor. A manager who interacts humanistically both up and down the organization system, to mechanistic isolate, that is someone who communicates formally only when necessary, is a sparse communicator, while the other dimension moves from informal developer, engages in spontaneous communication focused on developing employees, to formal controller, someone who monitors activities through formal channels. Thus, all managers relying primarily on formal channels for communications are not identical. There is a range of possible behavior they exhibit, as is the case of a social system oriented manager who communicates in a humanistic style. Moving on, we will now discuss the importance of communication in an organization. Communication helps achieve work targets through transfer of information and data that enables swift decision making. Besides fulfilling the social needs of employees at work, good communication facilitates sharing meaning among members, ensuring better teamwork. Breakdown in communication is capable of disintegrating when cohesive, even within cohesive close-knit teams. Compliance with corporate policies, follow-up on instructions, grievance filing and resolution are examples of communication that is performing a control function. As evidenced by the famous Hawthorne experiments, informal communication also exerts control on group behavior. Communication ensures changes in social norms depending on the narrative used within the organization. Communication regarding feedback on performance acts as a motivator. Good communication is a strength in handling a crisis or facilitating change inside the organization, since it imparts clarity on the situation. On the other hand, poor communication leads to interpersonal conflict and undermines effectiveness of the organization. Communication influences the organization's relationship with the outside world. Public relations specialists use communication to enhance the image of the organization, whereas documents such as the balance sheet and the profit and loss account signal the financial soundness of the organization. There is a trend to reach out to customers through cultural events where information about new products, existing performance, or corporate social responsibility is highlighted. Process. Communication is the process of transmission of a message from one person, sender, to another person, receiver, with a purpose. The sender encodes the message when transmitting it. Good communication means that the receiver decodes the message, attributing the same meaning to the content of the message. The sender can choose formal or informal channels, medium, for transmitting messages. The message may be distorted due to communication barriers like too much information, language difficulties, or cultural differences. Feedback confirms whether the message has been correctly understood. The communication process consists of several components. Let's take a look. A sender is the party that sends a message. Lindsay, of course, will be the sender. She'll also need the message, which is the information to be conveyed. Lindsay will also need to encode her message, which is transforming her thoughts or the information to be conveyed into a form that can be sent, such as words. A channel of communication must also be selected, which is the manner in which the message is sent. Channels of communication include writing, speaking, video transmission, audio transmission, electronic transmission through emails, text messages and faxes, and even non-verbal communication such as body language. Lindsay also needs to know the target of her communication. This party is called the receiver. To begin transmitting the message, the sender uses some kind of channel, also called a medium. The channel is the means used to convey the message. Most channels are either oral or written, but currently visual channels are becoming more common as technology expands. Common channels include the telephone and a variety of written forms such as memos, letters, and reports. The effectiveness of the various channels fluctuates depending on the characteristics of the communication. For example, when immediate feedback is necessary, oral communication channels are more effective because any uncertainties can be cleared up on the spot. In a situation where the message must be delivered to more than a small group of people, written channels are often more effective. Although in many cases, both oral and written channels should be used because one supplements the other. If a sender relays a message through an inappropriate channel, its message may not reach the right receivers. That is why senders need to keep in mind that selecting the appropriate channel will greatly assist in the effectiveness of the receiver's understanding. If a sender relays a message through an inappropriate channel, its message may not reach the right receivers. That is why senders need to keep in mind that selecting the appropriate channel will greatly assist in the effectiveness of the receiver's understanding. The sender's decision to utilize either an oral or a written channel for communicating a message is influenced by several factors. The sender should ask him or herself different questions so that they can select the appropriate channel. Is the message urgent? Is immediate feedback needed? Is documentation or a permanent record required? Is the content complicated, controversial, or private? Is the message going to someone inside or outside the organization? What oral and written communication skills does the receiver possess? Once the sender has answered all of these questions, they will be able to choose an effective channel. After the appropriate channel or channels are selected, the message enters the decoding stage of the communication process. Decoding is conducted by the receiver. Once the message is received and examined, the stimulus is sent to the brain for interpreting in order to assign some type of meaning to it. It is this processing stage that constitutes decoding. The receiver begins to interpret the symbols sent by the sender, translating the message to their own set of experiences in order to make the symbols meaningful. Successful communication takes place when the receiver correctly interprets the sender's message. The receiver is the individual or individuals to whom the message is directed. The extent to which the person comprehends the message will depend on a number of factors, which include the following: how much the individual or individuals know about the topic, their receptivity to the message, and the relationship and trust that exists between the sender and receiver. All interpretations by the receiver are influenced by their experiences, attitudes, knowledge, skills, perceptions, and culture. It is similar to the sender's relationship with encoding. Feedback is the final link in the chain of the communication process. After receiving a message, the receiver responds in some way and signals that response to the sender. The signal may take the form of a spoken comment, a long sigh, a written message, a smile, or some other action. Even a lack of response, in a sense, is a form of response. Bowie and Thill, 1992. Without feedback, the sender cannot confirm that the receiver has interpreted the message correctly. The other important feature is the feedback cycle. When two people interact, communication is rarely one way. When a person receives a message, she responds to it by giving a reply. The feedback cycle is the same as the sender-receiver feedback noted in the figure. However, the sender can't know whether the other parties properly interpreted the message or how they reacted to it. Feedback is especially significant in management because the supervisor has to know how subordinates respond to directions and plans. The manager also needs to know how work is progressing and how employees feel about the general work situation. The crucial factor in measuring the effectiveness of communication is common understanding. Understanding exists when all parties have a mutual agreement as to not only the information but also the meaning of the information. Effective communication therefore occurs when the intended message of the sender and the interpreted message of the receiver are one and the same. Although this should not be the goal in any communication, it is not always achieved. The most efficient communication occurs at a minimum cost in terms of resources expended. Time in particular is an important resource in the communication process. For example, it would be virtually impossible for an instructor to take the time to communicate individually with each student in a class about every specific topic covered. Even if it were possible, it would be costly. That is why managers often leave voicemail messages and interact by email rather than visit their subordinates personally. However, efficient time-saving communications are not always effective. A low-cost approach such as an email note to a distribution list may save time, but does not always result in everyone getting the same meaning from the message. Without opportunities to ask questions and clarify the message, erroneous interpretations are possible. In addition to a poor choice of communication method, other barriers of effective communication include noise and other physical distractions, language problems, and failure to recognize non-verbal signals. Sometimes communication is effective but not efficient. A work team leader visiting each member individually to explain a new change in procedures may guarantee that everyone truly understands the change, but this method may be very costly on the leader's time. A team meeting would be more efficient. In these and other ways, potential trade-offs between effectiveness and efficiency occurs. Communication in an organization follows a pattern depending upon who is communicating with whom and at what level. Identifying the network gives a fairly accurate picture about the organizational culture and style of leadership. Different authors describe different networks differently. We would now discuss a few common networks. Formal small group networks. Each network has its own characteristics and advantage and make it suitable for specific situations. A chain network is a rigid three-level communication where the lowest level does not communicate directly with the highest level. It maintains unity of communication and hence accuracy. The wheel network has a single person at the hub of authority through whom all communication is done, as in a team with a strong team leader. Yet, thus communication is accurate yet fast. The central figure emerges as a leader, with peripheral members may feel left out and less satisfied. The all-channel network allows free communication between people vertically as well as horizontally, as in self-managed teams, and promotes very high level of satisfaction among members. At times, accuracy may falter due to free movement of information. The free movement of information. Informal or grapevine network. Informal communication is referred to as grapevine. Grapes grow on a climbing plant, wherein information is transferred by word of mouth, cutting across formal channels. The grapevine is not controlled by the management. According to research, 75% of grapevine is accurate. Rumors arise when there is ambiguity, uncertainty, or anxiety in the work conditions. Imminent bad news is spread quickly by grapevine. The grapevine is akin to gossip, and the information carried has a strong possibility of being false. In such situations, it is necessary to keep employees informed and encourage upward communication to reduce uncertainty and anxiety. Communication may not serve its purpose because of certain barriers in the flow of information message from the sender to the receiver. These hurdles can slow down or distort information. Some of these barriers may be intentional while others are inadvertent. A few can be summarized as A. Filtering. Employees often fear annoying the boss by being the bearers of bad news. Hence, information is filtered, restricting the message only to the information the boss wants to hear or excluding negative information. Thus, issues of harassment, corruption, discrimination, and misconduct occurring within the organization remain buried. Selective perception. The receiver of the message often decodes the message according to his emotion, expectation, experience, and motivation. The message is interpreted according to the receiver's perception of reality. C. Information overload. The growth of the internet has led to an overload of information that makes it difficult for people to process all the available information. Some critical information can thus be neglected in decision making. D. Language. When the sender and receiver are not equally proficient in the subtleties and nuances of the language used for communication, there is scope for misunderstanding. E. Inherent apprehensiveness regarding communication. Research has found that some people experience social anxiety in oral or written communication. Such people search for reasons to reduce or avoid communication. They distort the communication demands of their job and use an inappropriate channel of communication. Let us now discuss the transnational implications of communication. Barriers to communication are particularly significant when different nationalities are involved. Words, gestures have different meanings. For example, the Japanese terms hi means yes, I'm listening and not yes, I agree with you. For people from high context cultures like India, China, and Japan, the official and social status and reputation are an important aspect of communication, while this is not so for people from USA and Europe. In low context cultures, the written word is sacrosanct. People belonging to individualistic cultures are explicit in accepting responsibility for conflict as well as offering public apologies. It is necessary to improve effectiveness of communication by reducing the distortion or noise accompanying the message. Employees can be trained to identify barriers and remove them. It is important for the sender and receiver to be aware of blockages in their own perception, emotions, attitudes, and background that distort communication. It is also essential to be aware of these shortcomings in the other person. Good communication practices confirming receipt or content of message can be standardized like standard operating procedures to ensure accurate and timely communication. In this age of information overload, it is important to be precise and crisp in communication. The message must be short and to the point, not rambling on. People can be trained in usage of written and oral language skills as to reduce ambiguity. Employees can be exposed to the relevance of non-verbal communication skills that can enhance communication effectiveness. For example, a manager could be using the right words but contradictory body language that sends confusing signals to the receiver and defeats the purpose of communication. Feedback regarding the communication skills of an employee is useful in improving communication. Feedback must be descriptive and non-judgmental. Feedback about behavior and feelings that behaviors evoke. Unlearning effective behavior. Learning a new set of behavior are stepping stone to improving communication. Let us now recapitulate what we have learned in this module. The process of communication is complete only when the message is received and decoded by the receiver with the same meaning as was intended by the sender. Often, success is dependent on the ability to correctly read non-verbal communication such as body language, dilation of pupils of the eye on encountering stress or excitement, a firm handshake conveying confidence, and so on. Being aware of the barriers to effective communication ensures accurate and effective communication. Understanding the concept and dynamics of communication makes it possible to improve communication skills. Understanding the communication style of the receiver helps to improve the quality of communication. For example, if a person is busy but has swift information processing skills, then it is important to be precise and brief in conveying the information in order to be effective. On the other hand, some people prefer to know all details in the information, discuss with others in a participative manner, and then take a decision. Organizations usually decide on the amount of openness in communication depending on the culture prevalent in the organization.